Dansei ni totema, hello all my relations. Today I want to share a little bit of information about the ingenuity and cleverness of my Indigenous ancestors. Before clay vessels came along, if they needed to heat anything up, what they would do is they would take a birch bark basket, which birch bark is one of our favorite plant relatives. It has waterproofing properties. So if you make a birch bark basket well enough, and obviously a larger one than this, you can make it actually waterproof. And so they used to store water in these baskets. And if they wanted to boil that water so that they could drink, what they would do is they would take a piece of granite rock like this or like this, and they would heat it up in the fire. Once it started to glow gray and kind of sparkle, that's when they knew it was ready. They would take 2 sticks, pull it out of the fire, and drop it right into the basket, and the water would instantly boil. Clever, right? Now, the reason why they chose these particular rocks is because they have incredible thermal shock properties. So they can go through extreme heat and then go through extreme temperature changes, like being dropped in the water, and therefore it wouldn't explode. Now, if we had a sandstone or any other kind of rock, it would explode. So they knew which ones were really good with thermal shock. Okay, so once you do that several times, let's say you use the same rock over and over and over again, eventually it starts to wear down and it becomes something that looks like this. This is called a fire-cracked rock. By the way, this fire-cracked rock was found along the Red River. It was no longer in situ. So in other words, by the archaeologists, they would say it was no longer in the situation that it was originally placed and had eroded due to the floodwaters. So it was just sitting there. Now, the natural observer would never even know what this is. But the moment I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. It's a fire-cracked rock. Evidence of heating the grandfather rocks and putting it into containers to boil water. Pretty cool, huh? So at one point in time, this rock looked like this. Nice, solid. But now, this rock is soft and it's not as strong. In fact, I just tore that piece off quite easily. Now, what my Indigenous ancestors used to do was that they would put that rock aside and let it sit and rest and rest and sit. And when clay came along and people started making vessels about 3,000, 4,000 years ago in this particular region of Manitoba, I call it the Lake Agassiz region, the area where Lake Agassiz used to be. They would take these rocks and crush them up. Now, why did they do that? Well, they found that their vessels were constantly breaking. So they didn't want to have to deal with vessels that couldn't deal with the vast temperature changes. They wanted to be able to take a vessel, put it right into the water, right into the fire, and then pour cold water into their vessel and start cooking. But anyone who's worked with clay knows that when you are firing clay, you got to go slow and you got to bring that temperature up to that clay really slowly. Otherwise, the whole thing will crack or explode. The reason being is that there's environmental water water that is in the atmosphere that sits suspended within your vessel. And if you raise the temperature too quickly, that water can't get out fast enough and your piece will explode. So the dilemma was you had to put something inside to prevent that dense packing of clay, because clay is so teeny tiny, you need an electron microscope to be able to see a clay particle. It's not like sand or silt where you can physically see it and you can feel it in your hand, a particle. Clay, it's not the same. It's so teeny tiny. So if you imagine that clay particles are so tiny that you can only see them with a electron microscope, then when it's packed together, there's no room for that water to get out. And it needs to get out. So they realized they needed to put an additive. Now, down south, they put ash in. Depending on which region you come from, they were putting mollusk shells in. They were putting sand in, a whole bunch of different additives. I'm sure some of them also put granite in as well. But my ancestors, they were like, okay, we really like these grandfather rocks for their thermal properties. Why don't we use them in our clay vessels? So if you look at an ancient pottery sherd, like so, and you put it into the light, this sparkles like crazy in the sun. And the reason being is because the granite material also sparkles. So that we know that they were putting this material into their clay vessels. We have actual proof of it in these pottery sherds. So they would take these rocks, these fire-cracked rocks that have been sitting, weathering out on the land through snow, ice, wind, sun, eventually really wearing down. And they would take that material and get something like this to grind it up. Now, because it's already worn down quite a bit, like I said, it's been weathering for a long time. It doesn't take much to actually crush it up. So they would take that material and add it into their clay vessels. Suddenly, their vessels weren't exploding when they initially fired it. Suddenly, the vessels were staying intact and dealing with that thermal shock when they would put it right into the fire and they pour that cold water in. Now, how do I know this? Because I actually use granite as well in my pottery, and I can take a vessel, put it right on a hot, like I can take it from, I was outside, let's say it was, it must have been about -15, -10, -15 outside, snow everywhere, cold winds. My vessel was cold and there was a fire. I put that vessel, even though it was really cold, put it right into the fire. Then I took some cold water, poured it right into my vessel, poured some wild rice into it, and started cooking. So there you have it. My Indigenous ancestors were incredibly ingenious and innovative. They really understood the natural world and the world around them. And they took what they needed use these various different technologies to help them grow and adapt. And let me tell you, when they started being able to slow cook things through with clay vessels, suddenly their diet opened up. Root vegetables that they weren't able to cook before, that required long time cooking, suddenly they could use that. So their food security increased thanks to the introduction of clay vessels into their territory. I hope you learned something. Ekosani.